Hello and welcome to Answering the Call with Dedication and Service, a special program highlighting the history of the Medicine Fire Service. I am Ken Forbes, retired member of the Fire Service. With me is Wayne Lust, retired captain, Medicine Fire Service for 36 years. And also we've got Garnet Decker, Chief Training Officer of the department, and he's got 14 years in. Today we will be talking about equipment and apparatus. And Wayne, Garnet, it's nice to have you aboard today to be able to give us some input of the history of the fire service. I know Wayne can probably give us the old stuff. Garnet can give us the new stuff.
Thank you, Ken.
Welcome aboard.
It's great to be here.
Thank you.
Okay. First question I have is, why did you both want to become firefighters, Wayne?
Well, I was going to university at the time, and I was working as a summer student for the city of Medicine Hat. And during the summer, a job posted on the bulletin board down at the electric line shop for a firefighter. And I thought to myself, wow, that could be a really interesting occupation. So I put in an application, and lo and behold, they hired me. And I've had a lot of fun since. It was a great decision.
And Garnet, how did you come in?
Graduated high school, ended up getting a job that was mundane, same every day. Wasn't totally happy, wanted something that would challenge and be rewarding, and every day was different. Liked the red trucks and the lights, and looked like it'd be a lot of fun, the adrenaline. So pursued it and was lucky enough to become a firefighter.
That's super. Wayne, did you receive training before you joined the fire service?
No, I did not. All of my training was done from the day I started. They put us on a 6-month training program. And because I had started with 2 other fellas, we all 3 of us went out and did hose evolutions. We went down to the river and pumped with the trucks. And so we all 3 kind of were doing a training together. And then right around Christmas time, they decided that they wanted to get us all on 3 different shifts, and then they turned us loose on the city.
Wow, how about that, my? And Garnet, how did you receive your training?
I ended up going to a fire college in Brandon, Manitoba called the Manitoba Emergency Services College. Took my training there to get my firefighter certification, also did some medical. We had learned firefighting, vehicle extrication, hazardous material responses. So did all that, graduated, and was lucky enough to be hired to a department within a week of graduating, so very fortunate.
Boy, oh boy, that's a lot of training there compared to some of us old people, I should say, yeah. And who trained you, and what stories can you share, Wayne?
Well, originally we started out, it was the training, as you probably experienced too, Ken, was done by the deputy chief in those days.
Yes.
So Earl Congdon was the deputy chief, and he took us out and did a lot of training evolutions with him. But he always brought an experienced guy with him, like Ivan Herringer came to teach us a lot about the pumps. And Ivan was good with the ropes, as well as Dale Lawrence taught us a lot about the ropes. But later they decided that we had to become technically qualified. So they sent us away to the Alberta Fire Training School, which was in Vermilion, Alberta. And they would always send about 6 of us up there, and we'd go through all the evolutions. And it was fun because we'd go there and we had a lot of prior knowledge, so everything was pretty easy for us. Okay. So, but we had a really good time, and we got to use some great props that they had there. And throughout the 36 years of my service, we continued right till a few months before. I was still doing courses from the Justice Institute from BC. So it was definitely a lot of training involved throughout the career. And when I retired, I had, I think, as many as 40 8-hour courses, which is, 8-hour courses similar to a university course. So
My.
we took a lot of courses throughout the years.
Oh my. And Garnet, about you?
The college had instructors. Lots had past fire knowledge. So a couple of them stand out was Mr. Mayuk and Mr. Fisher. Mr. Fisher liked to run, so we'd go for our runs in the morning, and he was a long, lanky, tall guy, and he could run. Mr. Mayuk was sort of a grizzled old firefighter who was very interesting, but they were all concerned about training us properly and right, and making sure that we would be successful once we graduated school. And it's funny listening to Wayne and everyone how we always still remember those instructors that obviously had an impact on our lives back then.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
That's
Did,
for
did the
sure.
two of you work together at all?
briefly,
Yeah, we did for a little bit. Yeah.
yeah,
Oh my, that's
yeah.
pretty neat.
it is.
Okay, the next question. Lots of questions of different types of equipment, such as how has fire trucks improved over time? Ladders, pumpers, specialty vehicles like hazmat. Fire trucks have become more specialized. Can you tell us something about that, Wayne?
Yeah, you know, doing the history book, I had learned lots of information about the old trucks, and actually the old horses was the very first fire engines. They were pulled by horses. There was generally some kind of a little pump and a hose wagon, as well as there was a water wagon that they would pull. So it was, you know, there was a lot of difficulty trying to get to a fire. Would take a long time to get there with horses and wagons, for sure. And then throughout the years, we were buying trucks, and they were built in the USA and southern USA. So up until, you know, the 1953 was the first fire truck that we bought that had an enclosed cab. This truck right here, the 1937 La France, was bought. It was a very good truck, but still an open air truck. We had a ladder truck that was purchased in 1949. It was open air, so you can imagine the middle of winter riding on the back, as you did, Ken, in the frigid weather, and driving in the open air cab. It was very, very cold. So it was pretty welcoming. In 1962 was the first truck that they bought. It had a cab at the back where guys could sit underneath, no seat belts, and it was only good for 4 people. So sometimes there were 6 people. So there were still a couple of guys riding on the back occasionally. And but it was so nice when you did a long trip from the Maple Avenue fire station out to the airport. It could get very cold back there. Sometimes we'd get guys climb up onto the hose deck underneath the tarps and sit back there while we drove home, because it would take so much longer to get home because there was not red lights and siren. 1971, they bought a really nice, powerful truck that could climb all the hills in this town. It was a great truck, but only a 2-seater cab, so everybody had to ride on the back of that. And I remember riding on the back of that with as many as 6 people standing on the tailboards going to a call. It was pretty crowded. You were standing on the side, as I think you had mentioned in one of your interviews, Ken.
Yeah.
You would ride on the sides of it too. And then in 1976, that was the first pump truck that we rode in the back that went to structure fires. It was an automatic, so what a difference it made riding on the back when guys weren't shifting gears and shaking you loose off of the back tailboard. And 1974 was the first year we bought a Dodge truck that had a front mount pump and grass nozzles. And before that time, we would go to a grass fire and we would just be chasing it with grass fire brooms. We would, sometimes people would come, farmers would come and they'd have wet sacks for us. They'd use that. Or the worst thing that you could have was this 5-gallon pump tank on the back. And by the time you ran up and down hills and were pumping the water with that, you could be tired in a matter of minutes. It was quite a feat. So the 74 Dodge was really welcomed, and it had a big booster reel. We could fight fires with that. So over the years, we got some other newer versions of all that. But I think, Garnet, you probably can tell us more about the new powerful trucks that we have.
Yeah, they look a lot different than what you did, and I think the biggest thing right off the bat is seat belts and open air cabs, something I never experienced riding on a tailboard. Safety reasons, things have changed with occupational health and safety. None of that's allowed anymore. All trucks come with seat belts and they're buzzard, they're alarmed if you're sitting in it. But trucks now are pumping up to 8,000 liters a minute, our engines, which is a lot of water. Easiest way to take that is if you take a swimming pool in somebody's backyard, like about an 18-foot diameter pool, round pool, and about 4 feet deep, we can fill that within 3 to 4 minutes. Whereas if you want to fill it with your garden hose, it'll take you probably 2 days. So more powerful, independent suspension, no Armstrong steering as before, it's all power steering. So enclosed, they'll seat 4 to 6 people with our pumps. We have our tanker truck, I'm not sure what you had, or if you had one back then, or?
Not really, not till about 1980, it was just a 1,000-gallon water truck. Okay. And that's all it was just a water truck.
Yeah. So our tanker truck now is about 13,000 liters, which 1,000 gallons would have been about 4,000 liters, so a lot bigger.
Yeah.
To correlate that, everyone probably knows what a 4-liter milk jug is in your fridge. Our new tanker truck would hold about 3,200 of those, so it's a lot of water.
Yeah.
Our ladder truck now is about 100 feet tall, comes with lots of safety stuff for it, so you can't overextend the ladder to have someone fall out of it by overextending it. It's air system on it, it's quite impressive. So
yeah, the ladder truck went from 75 feet was what they had purchased in 1949 to now it's 105 feet, yeah, which actually reaches all of the buildings in Medicine Hat.
Yeah, and you would have seen all that throughout your time
yeah,
from the older trucks. So did the older trucks have like outriggers like we do now, or?
No, that you had to be extremely careful with that 1979 one. If you put too many guys on the side of that and swung the ladder out, you could definitely tip the truck over. So yeah, you had to be very conscious and safety of that. So there was no fail-safes built into those trucks. Yeah. You had to use your noggin on everything you did.
Yeah, and now, like you said, we have the fail-safes and the outriggers to alleviate those potential issues. So we also have a Rescue 2 now, which is our multi-unit vehicle. We use it as a hazmat unit, command unit, and for vehicle extrication if required. So it's new to the fleet within about the last 2 years, so it's really good. And like you said, trucks are powerful. Hills aren't usually a problem anymore in town. So
yeah, just reminded me of the first rescue truck we had was 1979, and we still have that truck in the service. And I don't know what they use it for, but it's still there, and you could see it. And the jaws of life back then were so heavy that they were put into a cart and they were pulled up on a ramp with a pulley and a rope because they were so heavy. It took 2 grown men, everything they had to work the jaws of life. They were so heavy, and by comparison now, one person can easily whip that up and wheel it above their heads, yeah, and so on.
Well, and even now they're going to battery extrication tools, which is unbelievable. So
yeah, a lot of improvements in that regards, and good thing too, because we used the jaws of life many times over the years.
Wow, that's so interesting. You know, I sit here and I think about what you're saying, and like the ladder truck, for an example, 2 little rams went down, and that was to stabilize it. Yeah. And yeah, little things like that put big stabilizers on now so you don't drop it.
Yeah, and in your day too, Ken, at a car accident, pretty much all you used was jacks and crowbars and the fire axe and stuff.
Yeah, it was. We had a little pumping unit too that could expand stuff, but it was bars and prying. Oh boy. Yeah, it was not fun. And to get that stuff, and now, like you say, they've added so much to it that it'd be interesting to know just what all they've added to the jaws.
Well, the jaws, yeah. So you have a spreader and you have a cutter and you have that ram that you can lift up the dash. So and like you said, Garnet, now they're battery powered, so you don't even have to worry about hydraulic hoses getting in the road. Like that was the biggest to get around the car. You had to move the pumping unit and move the hoses, and it was a real tedious. It's certainly become a lot easier.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. Next question is, how has the bunker or clothing the firefighter wear improved?
Well, again, looking back in the history book, the bunker gear way back then was pretty much a canvas raincoat or a rubber raincoat and long rubber boots. And then
Just
originally,
stop you right there for a second. I know about that. That's,
yes,
that's what I had when I started.
yes. Well, and actually, I did too in 1979. It was just very quickly after that that they realized that it wasn't good enough for the fires that were burning in 1979 and 80, and that's when they introduced Nomex, and the difference then was when Nomex came out, it had a thermal barrier which protected firefighters if they got caught in a flashover or something like that. Up until that time, any pictures you saw of a firefighter caught in a flashover, his entire coat had been just burnt to nothing and his skin was extremely badly injured and that. So it's come a long ways in that respect. The helmets originally were a leather helmet, and they were pretty good. They would get wet though, and then they would lose their shape, become very heavy, and they would eventually rot out and not last that long. So that's when they went to the polycarbonate shell, and Ken, I think you showed one earlier. They were very nice and light, but didn't provide the real protection that you needed in a heat environment. And that's when they went to the fiberglass wrapped with a polycarbonate inner liner. But they were extremely heavy in the 1980s. You couldn't wear them for more than an hour and your neck was so sore. But now I'll let you continue on and explain what we use now.
It's just, everything's newer. They make the standards, right, and just better protect. So everything's just, I remember seeing pictures, like you said, where you were in a canvas coat and maybe rubber boots or, rolled around the knees. And now when we go to a fire, we're head to toe. You don't see a piece of bare skin on a guy. And we got our masks on. So with the standards out there, they'll test our bunker gear to up to withstand 260 degrees Celsius for 5 minutes, and they can't have anything melt or ignite on it. So they put it to extreme test to try to keep us as safe as possible, and it's amazing,
Really?
especially for yourself, what you would have when you started to what you had for protection to what we have now. It's advanced quite a bit. So.
Oh my. Wayne, did the specialty teams exist when you started? And what equipment and tactics were used?
There were no specialty teams. When you joined the fire service, you learned to do a little bit of everything. You were not really a specialist, but you learned a whole array of knots. You remember the board, Ken, that there was probably a dozen knots on the board, yes. And you had to know how to tie every one and know how to tie it sometimes in the dark or behind your back. They made you do it because it was really important. And then as far as hazmat, well, we pretty much just took a pail of sand and dumped it on anything that was spilled. So there wasn't a lot of hazmat. But we also, the boat, we had a type of aquatics team. There was the guys who knew how to swim. They were the guys who were the aquatics team.
You go first.
That's right. So, but yeah, there was, over the years, I think we're going to dwell on that later. I'll touch on that. So.
Yeah. Now we have an aquatics team, so they specialize in aquatics. So we have about 20 members on the team, about 5 per platoon. They'll do water rescue during the summer, but our whole department will still do that. Our department will also cover ice rescue. There's been a couple of times, I think you might have been involved, Wayne, in once where you rescued a deer on the ice.
Yes.
So our team will do that. The aquatics get into specialty is the diving part of it. So they'll ice dive, they'll water dive during the summer. They do a lot of recoveries. They're searching for stuff for the police with that. The aquatics guys, they need to recertify in their diving courses every 3 years. Something neat is one of the things that they have now is called the communication rope. So they actually have audio built into the rope so that they can be down however far and still talk to the guys on the surface. So which is comforting, as one guy had put it the other day when he was down there doing some work. So, and something Jason told me today is back and one time if they were ice diving, they would create a pinwheel on the surface where they'd remove the snow in a circle and lines. And that's how they knew if they were close to the hole, and how to find their way back to the hole was just to look above, see where the snow is removed, and follow their way back to the hole. Whereas now with their current ice diving, they won't do it that way.
Right.
So they've changed their tactics. So, and we have a technical rescue team now. So about 4 members per platoon as well. So 16 guys on the team. They take specialized training for that, above everything else that we do. They've gotten better as they've gone on. Just equipment improvements in equipment is essential. They make things lighter, easier to use, so it's less manpower, faster to deploy and set up, which is, as we all know, is critical in rescuing someone and getting them back safely as quickly as we can. So, and they've also taken on a confined space portion to the tech team. So they'll do confined space rescues if necessary in the city. So good thing with the new training facility at Station 2 is we were able to do that. We have a confidence maze in there that the tech team can use as well for their confined space, and they'll also rappel from the roof as well. So it's been really good having that training facility built into the new Station 2.
Yeah, it's good. I know that I was on some of the specialty teams later on in my career, and it's important to be able to know how to put your team into action if you ever are needed. Yes. It's very important, and the new station addresses that situation where you can continually train and do very good scenarios in there.
Oh, that's good. So,
You know, being a diver and what you're saying, I know when you got that first communication bit at Rattlesnake, and I'd gone out just to have a look-see. I didn't know about the communication, and who was ever up on top, a captain called Rick Bockstein, to come up and wave to Ken. The ice was clear, and I'm thinking, wow, they called him from way down in there, maybe 30 feet, maybe at the most. And he came up and he was underneath the ice, looking at me, and he's waving at me, and I waved to him. I was really surprised, you know, the communication bit, and how have the air breathing system firefighters use changed?
Well, it's changed for the simple reason that the products that are burning in the houses have changed, and we had to change. Back in the early 1900s, it was wood, paper, wool, silk, and cotton. And when those things burned, it gave off just a smoke that was kind of irritating. Not so toxic, but it was still superheated air that you had to be careful if you inhaled that. So you had to have the technique of being down low. And then they introduced the respirators, like the Chemox mask that you had used, Ken. And it was a very tedious thing to put on, get it hooked up. It was actually invented for the war, so that the people in the war could go into a place where they had maybe used some kind of chemical warfare. And but it was a perfectly suited piece of equipment for the fire service too. So we used it, but it took a long time to put it on. You had to spit in it. Am I correct in saying that, Ken? To get a chemical reaction to get it going, and then all it actually produced was oxygen. So you were breathing almost a pure oxygen, and that isn't necessarily a good thing either. But it saved a lot of firefighters' lives over the years, and they used that up until just only a few years before I started. You know, maybe the mid 70s was about the last I think they were used. Am I correct in that?
I think right in there, yes.
Yeah. And then they came out with steel Survive air breathing apparatus, steel tanks, which were extremely heavy and only held 2,000 pounds. So you could only get maybe 15, 20 minutes out of a tank. So if you went into a burning building, there'd be many times where people would run out of air, and so they looked for a better way to increase the time, and they went to lighter breathing apparatus and pressurized, where if you ran out of air, you weren't sucking in the fumes from the side. And we'll get more into the types of smoke that there is now, but I'll let you talk about the new types of breathing apparatus that they have now.
So sort of like when you started, right? They just continued with the self-contained breathing apparatus and kept going lighter, so carbon fibers. They started adding in more safety features. You'd probably be totally surprised now. Lots of lights on them to signify where you are for air remaining. We have what's called a heads-up display, a HUD. It fits right onto the regulator that goes into our mask, so you can actually see right here, depending on what color it is, how much air you have left.
Right.
And on the outside of the cylinders and the backpack as well, there's lights, so it can signify to your partner how much air is left. We have the capability of connecting our radios by Bluetooth to a speaker that's mounted with there, so it's giving you a lot clearer communications. You know what it's like when you're in a fire, you can't hear hardly at all, so they've put a speaker on there now to help with that. We're also able to, there's communications that you can have to where the outside, someone on the outside can tell how much air each one of us would have remaining in our tanks inside. So they've gone a long ways. It's all safety orientated. Cylinders, you can usually, they're now 45 minutes to 60 minutes bottles instead of the 20. So just longer.
It makes a big difference, especially if you're going up 5 or 6 flights of stairs to an apartment fire, right?
Yeah.
And if somebody goes down, they also have an alarm built into them too that alerts the rest of your crew that somebody's down and not moving, and it's ear piercing. It's extremely loud. It's another great addition to the safety of firefighters.
Yeah. So.
Well, getting into something that's a little different is, how has equipment for grass fires changed?
Well, I touched on that a little earlier. You remember this, Ken, where there'd be everybody would kind of stand back and wait for somebody else to put on the pump tanks. And originally the first ones were big aluminum tanks that held 5 gallons of water. So that's 50 pounds on your back, plus the weight of the tank. So it'd be 65 pounds. And it had just a little pump handle, and you would be pumping this as you're running, and you're spraying with the nozzle and spraying the grass and running around the edge. And that was the only way that you could attack the perimeter of a grass fire. Other guys would run and grab a grass fire broom, and they just brush the edge of it and kind of knock it out. So boy, you come back from a grass fire, you were extremely tired. It would really wear you out, right, Ken?
You got that right. Yeah.
But I know over the years they came out with front mount pumps, and then they came out with 4-wheel drive trucks, which you can tell us more about now, Garnet.
Yeah. So you get 4-wheel drive trucks. They'll even be like a large pumper, and they'll have grass nozzles on. We have 3 brush trucks within the city that are like a 1-ton truck, 4-wheel drive. Basically take them most places if you're careful. And now we're starting to get into, we'll use forestry hose, but we'll even get into using pressure washers. So you get a lot of high pressure to get into the ground to get that fire out with conserving your water as much as possible. So
yeah, they operate on very low gallonage.
Very low.
Yeah.
But it's great, so you can go a long ways on a little bit of water. So
yeah.
And easy to haul around. You're not dragging any big hose lines. It's a pressure washer hose that you can reach out to 100 feet to get that fire. So
yeah, and those pressure washers and the tanks, a lot of farmers have now purchased them and have them on the back of their bale hauling trucks. So when there's a big fire way out in the Cypress Hills, the farmers, of course, will come along and help us out as well, and that's made a huge difference, I noticed, over the years, to how well we can put out a grass fire out in the Cypress County area.
It's important to have that water out there. So
yes, for sure.
How has the firefighting trucks changed that provide assistance to an emergency at the airport?
Well, originally we would just we would often go with the grass fire truck because it had the most water on it, because there was no water out at the airport. And we knew that if there was something, we would have to, put some foam on it and so on and so forth. So we had, that truck was sort of set up for the airport. And then we'd always try to back up with another engine, like a structure fire engine, to bring some more manpower. and the rescue truck with the Jaws of Life. So that was our main response to the airport. Up until, mid 90s, we purchased an older truck from out of Moose Jaw that was used at the Air Force Base there. And we tried to get it going, but it was so well used that it often wasn't reliable. And it wasn't until recently that we purchased the new Panther, and you know a lot about the Panther, Garnet.
A little bit. I think it's probably about 2009 they purchased the Panther. So it's it's designed for airport firefighting and rescue. So it's called an ARF, Airport Rescue and Firefighting Apparatus. So it's designed for that. We carry a large amount of foam on there. It comes with thermal imaging camera, 2 nozzles. It's very efficient and good. Anytime you see those fires at an airport and the big trucks running across the tarmacs, it's basically a smaller version of that. So, and we'll still run out the rescue truck and an additional fire engine just to provide extra manpower and extra water and capabilities to extinguish any fires. So, it's a fun truck to drive out in the airport. Get out in the tarmac and give her.
You talk about this sort of thing, and I haven't been around fire halls for a while, and you're getting my interest up. I have to go and look at this stuff. That's amazing.
Yeah, I feel one of the very important features of that is the infrared camera, where you can be driving in the middle of the night, and people don't realize that, in the middle of town, you've got street lights and everything, but out in the middle of the airport, there isn't that, or out in the middle of the field, there isn't that many lights. You can hook up that infrared camera and you can actually see if there was bodies laying in the grass, so that you wouldn't maybe create another casualty by driving over somebody or anything of that nature. Plus it tells you where the hot spot is on that plane as well. So that's a extremely important feature of that truck, as well as the amount of water and the fact that it can go anywhere. It's an amazing truck to see.
Well, you were captain at 3 before you retired,
yes,
I believe.
I spent lots of time on that truck.
Well, let's go from grass fires to airports to boats. How have the boats and the fire service changed over the years?
Well, boats was something I was quite interested in, of course. I was involved in the purchasing of a couple of the boats at the fire station while I was there. And going way back into the flood of 1952, a couple of firefighters nearly drowned when the 12-foot aluminum boat they were in flipped over, and they were, thrown into the icy, swift-flowing waters. Had one of the fellows not been able to capture the guy and hang on to his partner, and they hung on to the house till their crew was able to come and rescue them, they could have easily died. And it's important to have your safety at hand as well. After that, they bought the unsinkable boat, which you remember that one, Ken. It was kind of a little pontoon boat, but it was so small that 2 firefighters, by the time you put a rescue victim in there, you were really pushing the limits of the boat. So it wasn't until the early 70s they purchased a 16-foot fiberglass boat with a 90-horse, well, I think originally it had a 60, but we upgraded to a 90-horse jet outboard engine on it. And it was pretty good. It got us out on the water, but because it was fiberglass, if you hit a rock, you'd put a hole in it. And a hole in your boat is not a good thing. No. So we had to be very, very careful with that boat. So until 1994, 95, we purchased an aluminum jet boat. It still had an outboard engine, but it had a tunnel hull, so you could be running through 6 or 8 inches of water, and if you hit a little rock or something, your motor was tucked up, it was out of the way. And it was a nice, big, wide 18-foot boat, and we could put lots of people in that boat if we had to rescue them. But the outboard engine just wasn't reliable enough for us. A few times it had something had happened, it had grenaded on us, and we had to rebuild the engine on it, and cost us a lot of money. So that's where in the early 2000s we bought the current jet boat, and you're probably quite well equipped to tell us about that.
Well, I don't know if I'm any more equipped than you are, but
Well, I can tell you, it has the 350 engine in it, and it has the type of jet pump on it that they use in when guys are racing jet boats up and down the rivers. It's almost impossible to destroy that type of equipment, and it's got a drop gate on the front that you can pull up to somebody and they can just walk straight off ashore, or drive a quad on it, or if you're out in the water, the dive team can just slide right off the front gate and into the water. It works so wonderful.
It is. And like you said too, it's going to be probably 6 inches of water you could run in once you get it up and running. So
Yes.
yeah. And then we have the 2 additional Zodiacs as well. Just the jet boat takes a little bit longer getting into the water, so if we need something a little bit faster, we can grab one of the Zodiacs, and you could actually carry it down to the riverbank and toss it in, and away the guys go. So
Wow.
yeah.
I think of the pontoon boat, and sure, it wouldn't sink, but it took a long time to go upstream. And then water would come in. If you get too many people in it, water would come into the front of it, and we had to put a board up on the front and seal it to keep the water from coming over the top. It wasn't pretty.
No.
Yeah. How has the guidelines for training for staying in shape changed over the years?
Well, when I first started, we were certainly conscious that we had to stay in shape, and of course, when they built the Maple Avenue Fire Station in 1975, they put some badminton nets in a badminton court into it, and then later on we built a basketball hoop into it that we'd play basketball in the evenings. There was volleyball nets for the backyard, and we played a lot of floor hockey and stuff like that. It was required. At 9 o'clock, our platoon chief or captain would come and tell us it's time to have physical activity. So away we'd go, and we didn't mind it. We loved it. It was great fun.
And I think it's basically probably continued from then. It's our SOG say you get an hour for working out. So guys are good. They'll prod each other on and have competitions. So it's very good. You gotta stay in shape. It's a physically demanding job. So we got gyms in all 3 stations that are very good set up. We have weights, treadmills, so guys can stay physically active and get their conditioning in.
Wow.
Yeah, the weight rooms are a great addition.
Yeah.
They are beautiful to, they're very specific for what firefighters need to stay in shape.
Well, that's interesting. Next question is, how is HCN and why it is important to stay away from the scene of a fire?
HCN is actually hydrogen cyanide. So, of course, cyanide, we're all pretty knowledgeable about anything with cyanide in it is going to be bad for your health. And it's created when, these days now, that things in your house, when they burn, you've got polyvinyl chlorides, you've got styrenes, polystyrenes, that's all your foam and stuff like that. As well as even things like your toilet is covered with a product called thermoset. And when those things are heated, and not necessarily even burnt, just heated to a certain temperature, they will give off this cyanide gas. And it's colorless, odorless, and for years we were looking, the fire's out. We'd walk into the house without wearing our breathing apparatus anymore, not realizing that there was cyanide gas in there, and we were ingesting that and breathing that, and as well as carbon monoxide, because a lot of times anything that's unburned in the house will give off the carbon monoxide. So it was apparent to us after some studies were done that we had to look into this. And now we have a detector, and nobody is allowed into that house until the house has been checked with the detector and those levels are clear. And you can tell us more about the protocol that we have in place for that.
So
Garnet.
basically, after fire is extinguished, guys still in their full gear, they'll go in, they'll do monitoring of it. So they'll monitor all aspects of the house, and until the levels come back within the acceptable limits, our you can't go in without a self-contained breathing apparatus. So you're still on air, and once they come out, they'll check and monitor it. So once we get below those safe levels, then you're allowed to go in without. So it's all about keeping our members safe and healthy.
Oh my. What memories or funny stories could you share about this old station that we're in right now, number 2? Wayne?
Well, I spent a lot of years here. It was really neat how it transformed over the years. Originally, we had the 1953 International Bickle Seagrave truck sitting there, and then we'd swap out. Sometimes we had the 1962 Seagrave truck sitting in the middle here, or sometimes the 71 International was sitting here. And always I remember the ladder truck along this side, and we would the 1979 ladder truck, and we would take it out all the time in the warm evenings and practice in the backyard, spray water in the backyard. But a lot of times we'd be, on a nice summer evening, have all the doors open, we'd be standing out on the front ramp, and people would be walking by with their small children, and they had to come in and see the fire trucks. And we gave countless tours to young kids, and it was really cool to see how excited the little children got about seeing the fire trucks.
Oh my.
Every little kid likes fire trucks.
Oh yeah.
For me, I was only in the station, worked for about 3 years. I was in the station. Some of the fondest memories were I was able to give Captain Eddie Smith a ride home on his last retirement day. So that's one that sticks with me, and I don't know who's going to miss each other most, if Dairy Queen's going to miss us, if we're going to miss Dairy Queen more, because our new Station 2 doesn't have Dairy Queen just down the street. So I think everyone paid a few visits down there.
Most definitely we did.
So,
Oh, that's great. Great stories. Any final thoughts or stories or that you want to add, Wayne?
Well, the fire service was, I loved the physical end of being a firefighter, the part of it where you could go out and, you'd run at a grass fire, or you'd go and have a house fire, or you get to drive up and down the boat. There's sometimes I said, wow, there's stuff I do here that some people would have to pay to go out and pay to do. It was a great job, but most of all, it was just nice to know that people really appreciated you, and we saw that a lot. People really told us a lot.
Yeah.
just exciting career, ever changing, challenging, rewarding, and the people you work with are what makes it a lot of fun. So.
Well, that's great. Well, thank you, Wayne and Garnet. This has really been interesting. Me being a retired fellow for a long time, and all this new stuff you're talking about, mine, I got to look around. I'll be over to visit you for sure. Anyway, it's been really great having you here on this program today, and to find out more about the history of the Medicine Hat Fire Service, check out and look through our history book titled "Answer the Call of Dedication and Service to the First 100 Years of the Medicine Hat Fire Service," available at the Medicine Hat Public Library and the Esplanade Archives. If you have any questions about fire safety, please call 403-529-8282 or go online, medicinehat.ca, or go to the fire service pages. I hope you enjoyed this program, and thank you for watching.